Welcome back. We are really excited for this afternoon. This is the first year that we are going to be doing a parent panel, which is fantastic. So we have a couple of parents up here who have agreed to field some questions from you guys. I'll be kind of just helping if you have a question for them, if you'll just raise your hand and I'll come out to you with the microphone. The topic of our parent panel is just the experiences and challenges of parenthood when it comes to raising a child or caregiving for someone with PURA syndrome. As we know, the experiences are wide and varied, but it is sometimes so incredibly helpful to hear from other parents who have been there, who have done this, just to both relate and know that you are not alone, and also sometimes you hear really great practical tips. So we thought this would be a really helpful and impactful panel for you guys as well. So before we get started and before we start fielding questions, I'm going to let these guys just introduce themselves. They're going to tell you a little bit about who they are, a little bit about who they're caring for with PURA syndrome, when they received that diagnosis, as just a little bit of an introduction. Melissa, do you want to start?
Hi, my name is Melissa Vaught. My daughter Taylor is 25. That's my husband and her father, Todd. And Taylor was 22 when she was first diagnosed. Kind of just kept going every year and asking for more testing, especially when we thought it was possibly metabolic in nature. And got the diagnosis like 1 month after the London conference. So I was kind of bummed about that. But I'm her full-time caregiver. I did used to, when she was in school, I worked up until seizures started around age 10, and then when they progressed, I just stayed at home. It made it easier than running to the school every day to pick her up, but that's my story. We're from Seattle, Washington.
Hi, I'm Ian Underhill. My son's 12 years old now. He was diagnosed about 3 years ago now, so I managed to make it to the conference last year. Live with my wife. She's full-time employment now, but her career has changed over years since my son was diagnosed. But my son was ill right from birth, and we did a genetic study about 6 years ago, and that just sat in somebody's cupboard for that long. And then 5 years ago, after that, 5 years, we had a diagnosis just come through the post saying he's matched this syndrome, which for us was, I don't know if a great relief or it was just, we were quite happy by that, to put a name to it. Because obviously he gets to 6 years and you know there's issues and things like that. But to put a label on it, for us was a good thing. So, yeah.
I'm Eva Gate, and I'm parent of the oldest known person who is PURA. I'm sure there are others. She is now 49, and she's going to be 50 in December. And we plan to have a nice big party for her. And we were just diagnosed last year. We never did any diagnostic testing. We didn't really see a point to it in our case. And my son and daughter-in-law, when they were thinking about having children, they thought carefully about it and they decided not to get any testing, any prenatal testing. I wanted to make sure my daughter-in-law wanted it, as well as my son. So there was really no reason to test her. She was just Sesha, just her own unique individual. And then when we got the testing done, because she broke through her seizure medications about 2 years ago and had very, very significant episodes, which she has gotten through. But our epileptologist, that's our neurologist who specializes in epilepsy, if you haven't heard that term before, suggested that we get her tested because there were some seizure medications that might work better for various kinds of conditions. And so that's why we got her tested. And lo and behold, PURA had just been discovered a few years ago. Wouldn't have done some good to be tested before. And we sat there, my husband and I, sort of, really? Can it really be that she has a diagnosis? And I've been trying to make sense of, what it means. It doesn't mean anything for her seizures as of this moment. But I go back and forth between thinking it's very, very significant and thinking not that significant. But coming here makes me feel like I'm very glad I got the diagnosis because I have community. And I see some of the other very, very beautiful, lovely children see here. And I think about my daughter's past.
Perfect. Thank you. Can you hear me again? Hello. There it is. Okay. We really do appreciate you guys agreeing to sit on this panel. As I mentioned, I'm going to come down here because I'm going to have to pass the mic off as I go. But the topic is the experiences and challenges of parenthood. So particularly if you have interest in knowing about what these guys' experiences were like before they had a diagnosis, how they have been adjusting and transitioning now that they've received that, what life looks like on their end. We would love to hear your questions. Does anyone have one? Perfect.
I'm just wondering what your experience is on availability of diagnostics nowadays with the insurance and health care for your child.
Yeah, honestly, having the PURA diagnosis hasn't made a huge difference as far as having issues with the insurance companies. Epilepsy is already a significant diagnosis, so I haven't, and there's been no, that I know of, drugs that have been, okay, this one's really working for the PURA child. And so, if that was the case, then maybe in the future having the diagnosis would help. But, it's been helpful in other areas for sure, like me not thinking I wrapped her too tight in a blanket in the first 3 days of her life. So, that's been helpful, but not as far as getting anything approved for insurance-wise, in my opinion.
I'm slightly different in the sense that I'm from the UK, so it's a little bit different in the UK. The diagnosis in the UK was basically a DDD study which people signed up to years in advance, and then they kept it on file, and then they suddenly came up with this new test and was diagnosed. Now the UK government is, I believe, committed to basically do a full genome sequence for any child which has got an undiagnosed condition, which was recently new. As for having the diagnosis, I don't think it really has changed from a medical point of view the way the doctors have approached it. I did ask my various few doctors, certainly the epilepsy ones, he's got PURA now, do you want to or treat him differently? Do you want to talk to other PURA parents? You guys must.
that's likely to happen. For example, the autonomic problems that she had during this period of, is this me?
It's fine.
Okay, something different. During this very difficult period she had for a year and a half. So she turned very cold. Her temperature at one point went down to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. But now they say, well, she's got an autonomic issue, and they know that that's something that comes along with PURA. So, you know, the differences in terms of treatment have been just very slight, because again, you know, they do treat conditions rather than the syndrome, but I think some doctors are aware that any particular condition may look different in different syndromes, and that's certainly why our epileptologist told us to get tested.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any other questions?
I think we all talked to everybody in the bar is what I was saying. So I'm not offended.
How has your approach to respite care and things of that matter, I mean, for each of you in your different parts of the world been? Because that's always a challenge and so forth.
Yeah, I'm probably the worst person to ask about this because I have the means and that, you know, I could hire a caregiver. I don't. I do it. It's going to change because it's my type A personality and I'm starting to feel it. So I'm working on that. But when she aged out of school, that was a big one. I mean, that was a nice 6-hour break. Go to the gym, go to the grocery store, and I was fine, you know. She comes home, you feed her. It was plenty of time. There's not a lot, maybe each state's different. There are some adult day homes, and there's no way. It was dreary. They were very significantly disabled. Taylor's, super social. I know you can't tell right now because she hates this type of stuff, and she hates being in her chair. So whenever she's in her chair, she's kind of like, ugh. It's a scoliosis fitted chair. For anybody that has scoliosis, it's really been helpful so that she doesn't have to do the bracing. And anybody that has scoliosis, your PT should be able to get that through, covered on insurance. So I think it's important in listening to Amanda talk. It's something that I'm going to work on, and my husband's been, on me to do. And so, again, probably not that I know that it's available through the state. My concern is what kind of person for $15 an hour is going to take care of my husband and I are the only ones that transition her. I don't even let my son, when he watches Taylor, she's either asleep or in the chair. And then I don't want to leave her in the chair for more than 2 to 3 hours. So, I take my breaks when I can, but they're few and far between. And Washington just doesn't, we're working on it. There's a new school that just opened. She does music, and they bring in therapy dogs and stuff. It's available every day. And so when we get home, I'm going to sign her up for 2 days. Right now she's doing 1 day a week there, and it's really fun because they have a lot of typical adult college kids come in and help with the kids. And she likes it. I have to realize, she's probably bored too. I mean, we get out every day, we do swimming. I make sure we leave the house every day. But I probably should defer to somebody else who's better at receiving respite care.
From the UK, I would recommend respite care. Originally, I don't know if it's a male thing or not, but you feel as if you're sort of giving away your child to somebody else and you can't do it. But it's more than that. Respite care is beneficial for the child and it's beneficial for the family as well. With Luke, or in the UK, we have a thing called a statement, which is basically assesses the child's needs. It takes about a year and a bit to write, and it's in collaboration with the parents and the council and things like that. And everything the child needs gets written into this statement. And part of that is respite care, to give the family, not just the parents, but the siblings of that child as well, a little break. So Luke goes into respite care once a month for a weekend, which is written into his statement. And it's a school, and it's got swimming pools, and he meets other people with different conditions and things like that. And it gives us the opportunity to go on holiday and with my other daughter, and we'll just go to the park and stuff like that, which isn't centred around Luke, because any other time Luke needs 24/7 care. You know, he doesn't do anything for himself. You know, you're feeding him, you're looking after him, and stuff like that. And it's good to get a break. So I would recommend respite care. It's not something to look bad on or feel guilty about. I think the word guilt is a big word with people with kids with disabilities, and it's hard not to feel guilty over anything. And respite care is a good thing.
I think my situation, perhaps like Melissa's, is sort of unique. But first of all, I want to say that listening to you makes me, again, very angry about our country and how poorly we do these things. And this is one reason we need advocacy. We need advocacy for our government to start instituting the kinds of things that they have in the UK and in much of Europe, other parts of the world. We're certainly well enough off to be able to do these things. We realized that Sasha was going to need full-time care when she was quite young. And so when Sasha was about 5 or 6, we decided to hire, well, it was called a babysitter, but it's not really a babysitter, it's a caregiver. And we just had wonderful luck with the first person, and then she left. And then we had a hard time finding somebody else. And we found a woman who came, and she stayed for 25 years.
Wow.
Yeah. She fell in love with Sasha. And I was, when Sasha was a baby, I was getting my doctorate. And it was very important for me to carry on. And since we were able to financially, we did have a full-time. We had a person, during 5 days a week. And then when we had our second child, we realized we needed more than 5 days a week because we needed some time with him to give him his attention. So we had a lot of care. And so respite, wasn't really a question for us. And of course, there's no respite from the concern. But finding a person to trust to help us with our child was enormously important.
Can I add one thing on, just about the sibling? I go back and forth. Taylor only has one brother, he's younger, and we've always done anything. If any vacation was a family vacation, we did, and there's guilt in there too, like you said. We would go to Disney World and say, sorry, we can't go on that ride, or we would try and do what we could to make it work, and I've always carried that guilt, but he just wrote me, I don't want to cry, so I'm going to say it really fast. He wrote me a big letter, and he's amazing, and he didn't get to do everything. I did overcompensate, and maybe he got a little nicer car than he should have gotten at 16 and 18 and that kind of stuff. So there was a little bit of overcompensation, but he is so much better equipped. He volunteered at it's Young Life Capernaum, and it's in the universities for adult special needs kids. He did 2 nights a week with these kids. They FaceTime him all the time. So I know that some of you have concerns with the siblings. Is this going to ruin their lives? In our case, and there's nothing wrong with taking separate trips. I don't know, she's tiny and little, it's easier to get her around, and we just never had the urge to. But he didn't suffer, in his own words, from it. He's a better, more equipped person and caring, and I've seen some siblings here, and that's what brought it up. I'm like, oh, that little boy's so amazing with his sister, and Carly's brother, and so, yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
If somebody wants to ask a question about siblings,
Yeah.
I'm happy to talk about that too.
Are there any other questions from the floor?
our daughter is 4, and so she still can kind of, I guess, from the grocery store, you know, until someone tries to interact with her, they kind of just think she's a big kid in a stroller, you know, she kind of passes, I guess. But as she gets older, I'm just curious, did you see a transition with the way strangers, it's kind of a concern of mine, like, is there a difference in how strangers kind of start to interact or treat your child? Because now it's still, oh, she's so cute, and if she doesn't respond when they,
Right.
you know, try to give her something or say hi to her, you know, she's shy or something, they just think she's shy. But I'm just kind of curious what to expect as that transition happens.
I think, unfortunately, yes, Taylor was the same way. I mean, she used to walk independently, not perfectly. She used a walker most of the time, but she could walk in and sit in a chair upright by herself. And people would say when she was in, you know, if we were going to my son's soccer game, she's in the stroller, the adaptive stroller. And, oh, wow, she's a little lazy, isn't she? But it was still like you didn't get that. And then, you know, I just had to add, her new game is let me get my head out of the chair. And so we had to do, I hated anything that made it more, you know, noticeable. But like in grade school, they did contained classrooms, and she had friends that would come in. I mean, in our situation, yeah, there wasn't as, you know, you're in high school and the kids want to go and have fun and party and go to the basketball games. So there wasn't as much of that inclusion, and it's just, you know, it's more noticeable as she got older that she was disabled. So you're going to get, most people have human decency. I do notice it depends on, honestly, some areas that you go through will be like, well, we know we're in this place, because the little kids will come up and stare, and the parents have to, you know. But yeah, it's going to happen because our kids don't have, you know, a lot of dysmorphic features, and so it's very confusing. Sometimes my husband's so nice, he's like, take it as a compliment. They're like, what the heck, you know, there's nothing wrong with her, why is she in a wheelchair? And so I think that's like, you're going to get a lot of curiosity because of that. It's not as obvious as a child with CP who, you know.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Luke's reasonably young at the moment, so I've got exactly the same worries you have. He's 12 years old. When he was 6, he was in a wheelchair, yeah, and people would look at him and go, oh, he's problem with his legs or something like that, so they would come up and talk to him. And you stand there and you go, well, he's not going to answer you. What do I say in this situation? And, you know, you come up and say, oh, he doesn't talk and things like that. And you go through that transition period. And then he gets a bit bigger and people realise, oh, actually, no, it's not just a wheelchair. Maybe he doesn't talk anyway. So those people don't necessarily talk directly to the child anymore. And we go through that transition now and stuff like that. But things change. It's nothing to be worried about or anything. It just things change.
You get used to it.
Most people are really polite. Everybody's polite, so.
They do change. I think the important thing for a parent, and I think it takes a bit of work on yourself, to not look at your child the way they look at your child. You know, to always keep centered that this is your child. This is the same child you love, whether, you know, however anybody looks at them. And you know, it's so easy to move into that, you know, they're looking at him, you know, and seeing him, seeing her the way they do. And that's what you have to stop doing. And I keep telling everybody here that when Sasha was little and she could pass, as you say, yeah, I used to think that was the easiest time. It wasn't. It was difficult because we didn't know what to expect. We couldn't imagine what she could grow into. You know, we had no pictures. You know, you hear about disabled children, right?
Yeah.
But you don't hear very much about the adults, right? And so it was, you know, it was just difficult. It was something that's always sort of there in the background. And that's not there anymore, you know. Sasha is just the person she is. And she's a beautiful person. Anybody who gets to know her loves her. You know. And I see with your children, the ones I've seen, how very, I mean, we are very lucky parents. It may not seem lucky at the time, and it doesn't seem lucky when they get sick and they're in the hospital and they're having seizures, and that's not lucky at all. But we have children that are so easy to love. You know, this is a gift.
I agree.
Sorry. Just making everybody cry. Does anybody have any other questions? I have one, and we may have time for one more after this, but I know that we, as we always do at every year at the conference, we always have several families who are newly diagnosed. For some of them, you know, they're just finding out and they have a newborn or an infant. And for others, it's been many years of being undiagnosed and they're finally just now getting answers. Obviously, everybody's reaction to that is so very different, but I'm just curious to hear a little bit from you guys about how you navigated that time, and anything that you would want to share with those parents who just received that diagnosis.
Well, for me, it was more about the parents that had already gone before and were diagnosed and all the plethora. I mean, poor Mel had to put up with about 5,000 texts from me and Amy, and just, you know, that was extremely helpful. The doctors were like, you know more about it than I do. So it can be overwhelming, and you instantly want to go see a doctor that knows about PURA. And guess what? I mean, I tried for years to get in any doctor that even knew anything, and you know, they all know what's out there on the research papers, and that's all they know. And so you might feel like you have to right away, but it's, you know, they know about as much as you know about PURA. And so the parent that's what was so helpful. I mean, I don't know what I would do without the Facebook page, you know, with all the questions. It's so great, all the questions and answers and stuff. So the diagnosis, I mean, some people, we talk about this because Taylor was older. Some people might be better off. Like, I don't know. I mean, I was so glad to get the guilt. I was just convinced I did something. Like, just convinced, because she was breastfeeding. She wasn't breastfeeding well. They told me not to give her water, and I didn't give her water, and I did this to her. You know, 100% convinced. And so that was great to have a diagnosis. But, you know, one thing I can reiterate is that these kids are so wildly different. Don't look around and like, I try and be positive because she's one of the older ones, and I don't want to like, oh, you're all going to have seizures and you're going to go from walking to in a chair. There's a lot of kids that don't. These kids are so, and even like the researchers and the doctor said, they can have the same mutation and they're totally different. So just, you know, don't stress out day by day. Easier said than done, but seriously, day by day, because Taylor can be so bad one day and I am so like this, and then the next day, she's fantastic and laughing and up walking again, and it just comes and goes, you know, with what they're battling and going on, so stay positive.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess it's just hit the internet, isn't it? That's what, you get your diagnosis and you just search, don't you? And you read all these journals and these complicated formulas and the genetic sequence, and you try to understand it, and then you realise, actually, I'm not going to solve this myself. Yeah. It's like, there's no paper which says, oh, by the way, just do this. Yeah. But then you find support groups like this, and you find the forums for different conditions as well, and they give you information, and the epilepsy forums and stuff like that, and you just move on from there. There's nothing to be worried from it. For my thing, it was a positive thing to get the diagnosis, and yeah, it was good. And a couple of years in, I know more now. I know a little bit more what to expect from various different, you know, posts on the internet. And as you say, you know, the kids aren't all the same. There isn't a definitive path. There is certain conditions which are similar, and people have those and stuff like that, which is good. And you might get some information about that, which you can feed back to the doctors. None of my doctors knew about PURA. Some of them were more interested than others, but in the UK, you go to your doctor, you have 15 minutes, and you're out. And when you mention, oh, my son's got this condition, does that change anything? And they go, well, not really, because he's got a cold, they treat the cold. He's got epilepsy, they treat the epilepsy. But for my benefit, I was more confident in Luke. And you know when your kid's ill, you know when to go see a doctor. You know, a couple of years, you get there. But before that, it was like, oh God, he's looking half dead here. You know, what do? You rush him to hospital, and the doctors just look at him and go, well,
Vitals are good.
the vitals are good, you know, and off you go, sort of thing.
Vitals are good.
Yeah. But no, it was a positive thing. I think. So.
We lived for so long with Sasha not having a diagnosis, and we really thought Sasha wasn't going to have a diagnosis ever. We just assumed that because until very recently, you know, that most kids with developmental disabilities and significant cognitive disabilities don't get diagnosed. Just there wasn't any way of doing it until now. So we never thought, and I just thought it was a random quirk in the universe that, you know, I somehow never, I don't know, I have a lot of guilt genes, but I missed that guilt gene. I did something wrong. So it wasn't a relief in that sense. In a way, I was worried whether it would suddenly put Sasha in a class of people, whereas for Sasha was just this unique individual, but she's just the same unique individual as she was before the diagnosis. And as I said, you know, it's coming here, being here this week, and I have to thank Mel for introducing me to this community. Thank you, Mel. I don't remember how I found you, but I was very glad I did. And I think together we can do wonderful things for one another and help other parents as they come in. And I can tell you that at least my daughter grew into the same wonderful adult as she was as a child. Still as lovable, still as beautiful, maturing, not the same. She's not the same as she was when she was a child. Her tastes are different. They change. They mature, just like the rest of us do. Don't put a big boogeyman out there. It's a fine life. And diagnosis or no diagnosis.
Are there any other questions? One more, this will be our last one.
I have a question about the puberty. Could you comment something about the girls? The behavior, is it like yours or is it different?
Taylor showed some signs around 9 when her growth was pretty off the charts for the first 9 years. My husband and I are pretty tall, so we didn't consider it abnormal. But then it stopped at 9. And finally at 16, I took her to an endocrinologist because I was a late bloomer, and I just thought, okay, well, you know, she hasn't had her period or showed any signs of maturing breasts. And so he ran hormone stimulating tests to see if her body would actually process because they thought we were going to have to do HCG, and she was able to. So he was the first doctor to say this is metabolic syndrome. I mean, they don't know where it is now, but you will have the diagnosis, and he was right. Anyway, so we put her on the estrogen patch, and I think I've told most of the people here, I feel, in my opinion, it was very detrimental for Taylor because he said, well, you know, you should do it because it's really good for her heart and her bones. But a lot of parents wouldn't because she'll stay small. She was 4'9". And I'm like, well, that's okay. I mean, whatever's better for her, I'm going to do it. I shouldn't have done it because she shot up and developed scoliosis because low tone, rapid growth, long limbs. I mean, it's like a, you know, perfect storm. So she still, to this, she was on estrogen for years, very low dose. It did make her develop somewhat, her ovaries are still baby-like. Probably they said she'll never menstruate. That's where we're at with it. Her bone age is still 14. Her growth plates are still open at 25. She did, and I know another parent who said that their daughter started menstruating later. In her 20s, when I took her off the patch and we tested 3 months later, she is producing some estrogen on her own now. So, and I know some of the kids, there's been some precocious puberty. So they're all different, but I think it's more of the trend to not go through puberty early, you know, at a normal stage, but they do start to do it later. So, I mean, if you're asking my advice as a non-doctor, I would just let them go on their own pace, because I have a lot of guilt about that one. Like, you know.
I don't think you should have any guilt
Shouldn't
about
have
the
done, I mean, well, if I could go back and change
scoliosis,
two
I
things,
think
it would be
is-
that and the seizure drugs, so, yeah.
But Sasha had a very erratic development. It was late. It was late. My memory just doesn't go back there, and I can't remember exactly when it happened. But it was a late development. And her period was always rather erratic, and we always kind of dreaded her period because it was the time when the seizures would get worse. To the extent that we actually put her on more seizure medication when we anticipated that she was going to have her period, when it was around the time she should have had her period. We think that, I'm going to shoot you way past puberty, because we think that the reason that she may have broken through her meds 2 years ago was because she's going through menopause. So certainly with the girls, it's not the normal developmental cycle. It's not. It approximates it, but it's not exactly the same. And it's often related to seizure activity. You know, Sasha started getting seizures around the time. Well, no, earlier than she got the menstruation. You know. But the scoliosis came on without any estrogen factors. Yeah. I think that's pretty much a feature of.
It's common with anybody with low tone, yeah.
Have scoliosis.
Thank you guys so much. Let's give them a round of applause.